The air outside still clung to my skin, bitter and dry from the January chill as I stepped inside the house. The hallway light was off, which was odd, given my family always kept it on like a lighthouse guiding us back. My legs trembled a little, not from weakness, though chemo had left its mark, but from something I couldn't yet name. The living room was dim, lit only by the side lamp beside Dad's recliner. They were all there. Mom, Dad, my older brother James, even my sister-in-law who barely showed up for birthdays. No one said a word, no one moved. It felt like walking into the aftermath of a verdict I hadn't known was on trial. James was scrolling his phone like nothing mattered. Mom stared hard at the beige carpet, her coffee untouched, and on the wall behind them, the quote in wood-carved letters, "Family is everything," hung like a punchline to a bad joke. I sank slowly into the armchair, the same one I'd collapsed into after every chemo session. My hands were still shaking from the cold and the nausea. I set my beanie down on the armrest. No one looked at me. Then Dad cleared his throat. That was the signal. "We just can't do this anymore," Mom said, her voice flat like a phone operator reading from a script. "You're too much for us right now." I blinked. "Too much." James chimed in without lifting his head. "We need the spare room for the new business. Plus, with your treatments, then it's just not sustainable, man." I heard it, but I didn't feel it right away. My brain was foggy from the chemo, and their words floated around me like echoes underwater. I tried to find words, but the doctor said the new cycle's showing improvement. Just a few more months, and "We've made the decision," Dad cut in. It felt like they were cutting me out like bad credit. I looked around again, searching for something, mercy maybe. The room was spinning just slightly, and the metallic taste from chemo clung to the back of my throat. I hadn't even taken off my coat. My duffel bag was still in the car, but the betrayal wasn't just in the words, it was in the hallway. 2 black trash bags sat beside the coat rack. My stuff, my books, maybe the framed photo of me from high school graduation, packed without asking, like expired groceries left by the curb. My mind raced backward, paying off James's student loans when Dad lost his job, helping Mom through her recovery after the stroke, driving Dad to appointments when no one else would. Now this. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part just froze. Maybe I misheard. Maybe this was all a bad joke. But I could still see my name scrawled on the masking tape over one of the bags. That was no joke. When the chips are down, you find out who's at your table. I remembered my old coach saying that once. Turns out I wasn't even invited to sit anymore. I stood up slowly. My knees protested, but I didn't show it. I wasn't going to beg, not after this. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called the medical transport service. The woman on the line remembered my name. "We'll have a van out in 30 minutes, she said. When I ended the call, Mom finally looked up. "Who did you just call?" "Someone who sees me as a person, not a burden." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I grabbed my old duffel by the door. The baseball cap, faded, worn, the one Dad gave me when I was 17, was still tucked inside the side pocket. I didn't look at it, just felt the brim against my fingers and threw the bag over my shoulder. Dad opened his mouth like he might say something. James stood awkwardly, scratching his neck. "Maybe we should talk." "No," I said. "You already did, without me." The van pulled up just as I stepped outside. It wasn't a regular cab like they probably expected. It was a specialized transport, with the company logo on the side and hydraulic lift for the wheelchair I refused to use. Neighbors were out. Porch lights flickered on. Somewhere down the block someone was barbecuing, charcoal and mesquite mixing in the crisp air. I caught Mom's glance behind the curtain. Embarrassment, shame, I couldn't tell. I didn't look back. As I approached the van, the driver stepped out. A kind man named Richard, who always asked how I was holding up without making it a pity contest. He didn't say much tonight, just nodded and helped with my bag. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Inside, the light was warm, quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something. My family had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. But little did they know, the truth I'd been keeping was about to surface. The rain hadn't let up. It slid down the van windows like the day was trying to wash itself clean. I sat quietly as we moved through downtown Dallas, not saying a word. I didn't need to. My silence had become its own language, more honest than anything spoken around that dining table. When we reached the building, the driver helped me out. I nodded a quick thanks, rolled forward, and let the automatic doors close behind me. The elevator ride was quiet, just the hum of the motor and my thoughts. 15th floor. I slid the keycard through, opened the door, and paused. This was mine. Warm lights clicked on overhead, reflecting off clean hardwood and glass. The apartment wasn't big, but it was enough. Open kitchen, wide doorways, a window wall that looked out over the city like it had something to say. I let the door shut behind me and exhaled. Not because I was tired, because it was the first breath I'd taken that didn't belong to someone else. I set my bag down, unzipped it. Clothes, folded but not cared for, a bottle of meds, a few folders, and then my hand found it. The old, beat-up baseball cap, frayed edges, sun-faded logo. I stared at it a second, then placed it on the floating shelf near the window. Somewhere visible, somewhere it could watch. I'd planned this. Quietly, deliberately. Months back, before the chemo got rough, before the guilt from their help started to smother me, I saved what I could, filed the paperwork, took meetings they never knew about. I'd set this whole place up with no help, no hints. While they saw someone falling apart, I was building an exit. Freedom came with a heaviness no one warned me about. I moved toward the window and sat in the armchair facing the skyline. The city lights blinked like they were keeping time, but inside, everything had slowed to a crawl. I wasn't used to this much quiet. The kind that didn't come from people ignoring you, but from finally being alone. I pulled out my phone. Texts from Mom. Please come home. We can fix this. You don't understand how hard this is for us. That one made me laugh, dry and bitter. I hovered my thumb over reply, then tapped delete. Again, gone. Sometimes the only way to stand up for yourself is to walk away. That line came back from my college days, Professor Daniels. It didn't hit me back then. Now it carved its way through my chest. I stayed there a long time. Then came another knock, not urgent, just steady. I opened the door. John stood there holding a paper bag, looking the same as always. Flannel, jeans, eyes that didn't flinch. Thought you might need groceries, he said, walking in like he'd been here before. He hadn't, but I didn't stop him. Place looks good. You did this yourself? Yeah. He set the bag down. Didn't doubt it. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't tilt his head or soften his voice, just started putting things away like this was routine. You've always been tougher than you think, he said, glancing at the cap on the shelf. I needed to remember, I said quietly. He didn't press, just nodded, handed me a tea bag, and filled the kettle. We talked a little. Not about them, about plans, about work, about the project I'd kept tucked away, even from him until recently. The Adaptive Adventure Program for Cancer Survivors. Real stuff. Hiking, challenge courses, getting your life back 1 mile at a time. He didn't blink when I showed him the emails, sponsorship interest, permits, early contracts. They think I'm helpless, I muttered, flipping my laptop shut. They need to believe that. Makes them feel like the good guys. That sat with me for a while. They'll spin it their way, he added. But you got the truth, and now you've got control. After he left, I sat again by the window, tea in hand. City still moving. The cap pulled my attention. I remembered that trip, just me and Dad. Tent pitched on rocky dirt, sky full of stars. I was maybe 10. He handed me that hat like it meant something, said, "We'll always have your back." And I believed him. For years, I believed him. But that promise had an expiration date, and it came the night they packed my things into trash bags. I stood up, walked over to the desk, and opened a fresh notebook. Wrote down 3 things: rehab, launch prep, press release draft, no drama, no speeches, just the next 3 steps in my life. As the city lights flickered below, I realized the story my family told about me was about to be rewritten, by me. And the first crack in their perfect facade came sooner than anyone expected. The rain had been steady all evening, sliding down the wide glass panes of my apartment like streaks of cold silver. I sat in the same armchair I'd claimed my first night here, looking out over Dallas. The hum of traffic below mixed with the faint echo of music from a bar down the street. It was quiet enough for me to hear the soft vibration of my phone when it lit up on the coffee table. A message from my cousin, barely more than a stranger to me. "We missed you tonight. Hope you're okay." No context, no invitation, just that. I frowned, picked up the phone, and opened social media. It didn't take long. Photo after photo filled my feed. My parents, my brother, my sister, their kids, even family friends I hadn't seen in years. All of them gathered around a long dining table lit with candles, glasses raised, hands clasped, smiles practiced, captions like "family night" and "nothing stronger than blood." Not a single mention of me. No tag, no call, no text. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, a scheduling mix-up. But as I scrolled through the images, the truth settled in. This wasn't an oversight. This was a choice. My seat at that table wasn't just empty. It had been filled. That realization landed heavier than any insult. 2 weeks earlier, I'd asked in our family chat if there was another get-together planned. My sister's answer had been swift. "Nothing's planned." Seeing the photos now, those 2 words felt like a knife wrapped in sugar. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's punishment. I didn't remember where I'd heard it first, but it felt carved into my ribs at that moment. The neighbor next door was having their own party, laughter bleeding through the wall, clinking glasses, muffled music. It made the quiet in my apartment feel like a punishment cell. I stared at one photo of my brother carving the roast, his arm around my nephew. My nephew wore the jacket I'd bought him last Christmas. It was as if they'd rehearsed a scene of my absence. I sat still for a long time trying to figure out if I was overreacting or finally seeing the truth. Memories of missed holidays, bills paid, favors done flickered through my mind like a slideshow of thankless years. This wasn't the first time they'd excluded me, but this time felt like the final act. I pushed myself up from the chair and went to the bookshelf, pulled down a blank journal, wrote the date at the top and underlined it twice. On the cover, in block letters, I scrawled, "Truth they'll never admit." Slowly, I began to write. Lies, patterns, manipulations, not as event, but as evidence. "If the truth makes them uncomfortable," I wrote, "maybe they shouldn't have lied." The sentence stared back at me, calm and unshaken. This wasn't pettiness anymore. This was clarity. I didn't text anyone, not yet. Instead, I opened my public page and typed one sentence. Funny how people act like they've lost someone they threw away. My finger hovered over the post button for a second, then tapped. Within minutes, notifications began to roll in. Likes, shares, quiet comments. This hit me hard. I've been there. Stay strong. My inbox filled with messages from strangers, each one a small echo of my own story. People cut out of their families, erased from the narrative. A quiet solidarity formed in the glow of the screen. For the first time that night, I didn't feel completely alone. The rain outside softened. The neighbor's music stopped. The apartment felt less like an exile and more like a watchtower. My silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was a weapon, a choice. Let them think they'd erased me. They'd hear my voice louder than ever soon. The night after I posted my message, the rain returned heavy against the windows, each drop a soft drum echoing in the silence of my apartment. My phone lit up again. Old friends checking in, distant cousins silent, some nervous. My post was spreading. Likes, shares, cautious praise. Some replies asked, "Are you okay?" Others stayed quiet. The tension weighed on me like pressure building behind a door that's about to crack. I stared at the screen, wanting to show them everything I had, documents, images, messages, but I held back. I decided to start with my sister. One call, one moment to demand truth. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. My voice was steady. "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked. I didn't shout, I didn't scold, I just asked. She paused. I heard the rustling of papers in the background. Then she said, "We didn't think you'd want to come in your condition." The words felt like a slow twist in my gut. I swallowed. "Don't make decisions for me based on assumptions," she sighed. "You've been distant lately. You stopped answering calls." I wanted to correct her, to point out how many times I picked up, But I stayed quiet, because I already knew how this would play out. Later I heard from a mutual cousin what she was saying to the rest of the family, that she did invite me, but I never replied, that I was creating drama, that I was trying to guilt people. The truth they told wasn't what happened. It was the version they wanted others to believe. Funny how quickly the truth becomes a myth when people feel exposed. They rewrote the narrative. My absence became proof of my selfishness. My silence became defiance. A few hours later, my phone chimed with a voicemail. The caller ID showed Dad. I hesitated before listening. His voice was cold. "I'm ashamed you dragged our family into this online spectacle," he said. Real families solve things quietly, not through pity posts. He paused as though waiting for me to argue. I stayed quiet. "Blood may be thicker than water," he continued, "but some blood turns cold faster than ice." The irony hit me hard. The man who left me alone through illness now lecturing me on family values. I sat stunned. I opened my journal and wrote, "Their version of me," at the top of a fresh page. I started listing statements I heard. They did invite her. She ghosted, trying to guilt trip us. Next column, what actually happened. I mapped contradiction after contradiction. This isn't about being lied to. It's about allowing lies to overwrite your identity. I wrote another line. The first person to speak doesn't always tell the truth, just the loudest version of it. I closed the journal, hands trembling slightly. But inside, something sharpened, a resolve. I would not let them control the story any longer. They thought I'd crumble under the weight of their lies. Instead, I'm sharpening the truth. Morning light filtered through my curtains. I held a mug of tea in both hands, staring at the journal lying open on the table. Their version of me. The pages were marked with accusations, denials, and half-truths. I read them slowly, each word a weight. Stay quiet or push back. The cost of silence had become evident. Then a ping. My phone lit up. A friend had sent me a screenshot of a meme my sister posted, something passive-aggressive about victim culture and attention-seeking. It stung. Enough was enough. I texted James, "Let's meet at the Café Monet at 11. I didn't say why. He agreed. 20 minutes later, I walked into the cafe. Late November light slanted across small tables. Jazz played softly. I spotted James sitting near the window sipping black coffee. He looked up, surprised but composed. He greeted me with a polite nod. "Hey." I slid the screenshot across the table. "Explain this." He frowned. "That was just someone's joke. Not meant to hurt." I didn't flinch. "If they didn't mean harm, why does it keep hurting?" He shifted. "You've always been sensitive." I leaned forward. "Don't dismiss me so casually." The tension between us felt thick, like old wires groaning under strain. I kept my voice calm, not pleading, not shouting, just firm. Then I said it clearly. "If this continues, if I hear one more lie told about me, I will go public. I will defend myself." My tone surprised him more than the words. His eyes widened. He said, "You'll tear the family apart." I looked him in the eyes. "They already did that. I'm just refusing to be buried under the rubble." He leaned back, unsteady. The invisible line had been drawn. As I headed toward the door, something caught my eye outside. A little girl wearing a baseball cap just like Dad used to give me. I stopped. She looked up at me. My heart thudded. I dropped the piece of matching keychain I'd been carrying into a nearby trash bin. No flash. No fanfare. Just a small gesture. I don't need things to prove who I am anymore. Back in my apartment later, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at the first line of a new blog post. I typed the title, "Truth Isn't a Weapon. Until They Use Lies First." I poured out real stories, advice, boundaries, not revenge, claiming my voice. When I hit publish, a wave of calm washed over me. Silence wasn't my prison anymore. The next time they tell my story, they'll have to face the version I'm finally ready to share. When the invitation arrived, I recognized the wording immediately. Keen community gathering. My mother's handwriting on the envelope looked casual, but every stroke carried weight. Why now? Why include me after all the silence? I sat in my apartment holding the envelope, debating. All I needed was one sign. Part of me wanted to refuse. Part needed to see their faces, look them in the eye. In the end, I dressed simply, but with dignity, and headed out. The venue was a modest hall behind the church, rows of folding chairs, a stage at the front, a faint aroma of coffee and florals lingering in the air. Local faces filled the room. Neighbors, cousins, church members. I walked in slowly, scanning. Then I froze. Beside the stage was a framed Keene family photo, everyone in it except me, a gap in the lineup where I belonged. My heart tightened. A small voice pulled me from the moment. A little nephew tugged at my sleeve. "Uncle, why aren't you in the family photo?" he asked innocently. Silence dropped. Some looked away, uncomfortable. His question landed sharper than any insult. I knelt and said quietly, "I was never asked to pose." The room shifted. Soon after, my sister stood to welcome everyone. "We honor the Keene legacy," she began, gesturing at that framed photo. I walked toward the stage. I spoke in a firm but calm voice. "I hope you don't mind me correcting one thing, but I'm not a ghost." Eyes flicked to the missing space. Someone turned the photo frame to reveal the gap clearly. Hushed murmurs rose. A cell phone shutter clicked. I held the silence. Let the absence speak loudest. Afterwards, people came by. Quiet apologies, awkward glances. I accepted support from those who meant it. I declined the rest without confrontation. Inside, I resolved, visibility matters. Silence no longer hides me. Back home, I opened my laptop, drafted a piece for survivors, boundaries for truth. And I titled it "Truth Isn't a Weapon Until They Use Lies First." As I typed, strength returned, not from confrontation, but from owning my voice. When they tell my story next, they'll have to face the version I'm finally ready to share. I sat at my kitchen table that evening with the blinds drawn halfway and the hum of traffic outside, faint but steady. In front of me lay the growing pile of papers I'd been gathering for months. Bank statements, insurance policies, old email printouts. My father's den had always been off limits, but after the last gathering, an aunt quietly passed me a key. Bruised but not broken from what happened in that basement hall, I felt something stronger than grief. Clarity. I didn't want rumor shaping my reality anymore. I wanted evidence. Tonight I was ready to face whatever was hiding in those old files. The den still smelled faintly of cedar and pipe tobacco. I sat on the floor by his desk, papers fanned out around me. At first it was routine. Receipts, tax documents. Then a single policy caught my eye. An insurance benefit naming me as the original beneficiary. Below it, a later amendment dated squarely in the months I was fighting for my life. The signature wasn't his. The beneficiary now read my brother's name, no phone call, no explanation. They had used my vulnerability to cut me out not just of family dinners, but of my father's legacy. The betrayal was almost clinical in its neatness. I didn't shake. I took my phone out, took time-stamped photos of every page and uploaded them to a secure folder. I leaned back against the desk, looking at the ceiling. I remembered the nights in the hospital when I believed we were bound tighter because of my illness. I remembered trusting them to handle things while I was gone. And here was the truth, signed and sealed. "Blood never forgives what betrayal binds in secret," I whispered to the quiet room. The words tasted like iron, but under the hurt was resolve. This was no longer just about my feelings. It was about calculated theft dressed as family loyalty. In the bottom drawer was an envelope, my name on it in my father's unmistakable handwriting, postmarked months before he died. I stared at it a long time before opening it. The paper was thin, the ink faded, but the words were steady. He was sorry for not protecting me from the others. He wrote he was proud of my fight, that I had more strength than he ever had. And then, underlined twice, "Never let them silence your voice. Your story is yours." My throat tightened. It wasn't a check or a legal clause. It was something heavier, proof I once mattered, that my father saw what was happening even if he didn't stop it. I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket pocket. That paper felt like a blade. Not to cut, but to defend. Back in my apartment later that night, I spread everything across my kitchen table. The forged amendment, the original policy, the letter. Piece by piece, a dossier. I opened my laptop and began drafting a timeline. Dates, signatures, who said what, and when. The glow of the screen caught the edge of the letter, and for a moment it looked like a lantern in the dark. I picked up my phone, pressed record, and rehearsed what I would say to my mother the next day, making sure the legal notice played before the beep. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt prepared. They thought they erased me, I murmured into the microphone, but they forgot ink still stains truth. Outside, a late bus rumbled past. Someone laughed 2 floors down. The city kept moving, but for me, time felt suspended, like a bow drawn back, waiting to release. I looked at my father's letter again and felt a steady calm settle in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to survive their narrative. I was thinking about how to tell mine. When the light hit what they had hidden, they would have to face it. Every omission, every signature, every lie. Tonight, the walls in that old den whispered secrets I'd longed to hear, and my reckoning begins. The morning light came in through the blinds like it didn't care what I was about to do. I sat at my dining table, laptop open, everything I'd spent weeks collecting spread across the screen in neatly labeled folders. Insurance forms, the policy amendment, copies of my father's letter. I'd read through them so many times the words no longer surprised me, but today wasn't about being surprised. It was about making sure no one could say they didn't know. I opened a blank post on my blog. Title, What They Tried to Hide When I Got Sick. I wrote with clarity, not anger. This wasn't revenge. This was setting the record straight. I quoted my father's letter word for word. I scanned in his handwriting. I showed the date stamps, the documents, the signatures that changed everything. No commentary, just truth. I hit publish, exhaled, and leaned back in my chair. The first few minutes were quiet. A handful of clicks, a comment or two. Then the numbers ticked up, slow, then faster. I refreshed the page and saw my name tagged in a post from someone I didn't know. Then another. The messages followed, some accusing, some kind. "You're airing dirty laundry," one said. "I've lived this too," said another. That second one stayed with me. I was halfway through my inbox when I saw it. An email from a local journalist. Subject, Sunday feature, are you willing to talk? I read it twice. Then I wrote back, yes. Meet me at the community event today. I'll be speaking there. I stared at the screen thinking about how long I'd waited for this day. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Truth doesn't knock. It breaks the door when it's time. The community center wasn't much. Rows of plastic chairs, scuffed floors, a water cooler humming in the corner. But people showed up. Survivors, advocates, folks with stories of their own. I was part of a panel on family trauma, nothing flashy, just 5 of us sitting in front of people who'd lived through hard things. During QA, I stood. I have something personal to share, I said. Something that might feel familiar to some of you. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket, read the final paragraph out loud. His words, apologizing, naming what happened, telling me to never let them silence me. The room held its breath. When I finished, there was a beat of silence, then applause. Quiet at first, then louder. I wasn't sure how to feel. I handed copies of the letter and documents to the reporters who were there. This isn't about drama, I said. This is just the truth. That evening, I sat on the edge of my couch watching the local news. I wasn't the lead story. I didn't need to be. It was just a 2-minute segment. My name, my voice, a glimpse of the documents. The tone was respectful, almost soft, but that's all it took. The story spread. People began reaching out, cancer survivors, children cut off from their families, lawyers offering free help. One message simply said, "Your silence was graceful, but your truth is powerful." I read it 3 times. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I just needed someone to understand why I couldn't keep this locked away anymore. But not everyone was clapping. My phone buzzed late that night. A voicemail from my mother. Her voice cracked. "I can't believe you did this to us." No explanation, no denial, just that, to us. My brother sent a text. "Hope it was worth it." That was it. Cold, sharp. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to. For once, the weight of this wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. They'd built the lie. Now they could sit in it. I stood by the window, phone in hand, watching the city flicker like it didn't care who had betrayed who. And maybe it didn't, but I did. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was clean, not perfect. Not healed, just no longer coated in the silence they had wrapped around me. And I knew then I didn't want their apology. I didn't need some drawn-out explanation. I just wanted to move forward without dragging their shadows with me. I closed the curtains and sat back down. My father's letter was still in my pocket, folded, worn, but real. And as the world heard my voice, they finally had to live with what they'd done in silence. The rush came and went like a flash flood. My post lit up timelines, comment sections, and inboxes for days, but now, a week later, it was just me and the quiet. I left most of my notifications off. Couldn't stand the buzz anymore. I needed stillness, space to breathe. I spent my mornings in silence, coffee in hand, watching the sky shift through the kitchen blinds. The noise had faded, but my emotions were still loud. A few folks from my past reached out. Old neighbors, a distant cousin from Oregon. They didn't ask for details. They just said things like, "We saw, we believe you." And that was enough. I spent most afternoons journaling, not to process, just to release. For the first time, I wasn't writing to prove anything. I wasn't building a case. I was finding peace. I realized somewhere along the way that going public was never about punishment. It was about not living like a secret anymore. Then one morning, as I was sorting through the usual stack of junk mail, I saw it. A plain white envelope, no return address. I paused. Something about the weight of it. The way my name was written. Like someone was holding their breath while they wrote it. Inside was a photo of me and my brother, back when we were just kids. Must have been around 8 or 9. We were barefoot on the front steps, arms over each other's shoulders, grinning like we didn't know what betrayal meant yet. Scribbled across the bottom in that crooked, unmistakable handwriting. "I'm sorry." No name, no letter. Just that photo and 2 words. But I knew it was him. My brother never had neat handwriting. He used to press too hard with the pen, just like this. I sat down at the table, photo in hand, and I let the tears come. But not the sharp ones. These were warm, strange, a mix of anger that never had a landing spot, and gratitude I didn't expect to feel. No, it didn't undo the years. It didn't repair the silence or the signatures, but for a second it reminded me of the boy I once shared a bunk bed with, and that cracked something open. That night, I didn't want to be indoors. I drove out to White Rock Lake. The air was cooler than I expected, and I pulled my jacket tighter as I walked the trail I'd walked during chemo, during diagnosis, during divorce. This trail had seen me broken and invisible, but tonight, I wasn't hiding. I moved slow. Let the sound of gravel under my shoes steady my breath. I passed a family grilling near the water, dad flipping burgers, kids arguing over a frisbee. I didn't feel envy. I felt grounded, like I could see it for what it was without needing to be part of it. I sat down on a bench near the edge of the lake and pulled out the photo again, held it in my lap. The wind picked up, and I spoke out loud, not to the water, not to him, but to myself. I forgive them. It wasn't rehearsed, wasn't even planned. But it felt right, not because they deserved it, not because time healed everything, it didn't, but because I was done carrying it. I closed my eyes and imagined dropping each moment, the slammed doors, the unanswered calls, the legal letters, into the lake, letting them drift. Then I whispered a prayer, not dramatic, just honest, for my healing, for theirs, for peace. And in the silence that followed, I felt something inside me loosen. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man surviving. I felt like a man becoming. Back at home, I opened my laptop and updated the blog. Not to reopen wounds, but to close a chapter. I titled it, "What Comes After Truth?" I wrote, "I'm not healed fully, but I'm not hurting silently anymore." Hit publish. Close the screen. As I stepped outside to take out the trash, my neighbor across the street waved. Just a simple wave, but it landed different this time. I waved back, smiling a little. That photo's still on my dresser now, not framed, just resting there. A reminder of something broken and something mending. As I lay in bed, I thought, maybe it's not the end of the story. Maybe it's just the beginning of the one I get to write.